Our next guest is from the Teachers Professional Association of Victoria, Edward Schuller. Good morning.
Hey, Tom. Good to be back on the show.
Were you surprised at this, that in fact, primary school teachers and presumably secondary school teachers in Australia, by international standards, are actually very well paid?
Look, not necessarily, because like you rightly mentioned, waiters are necessarily well paid when compared to other economies in other countries in the world. So I think I do agree with the previous caller talking about how that's comparing apples with oranges. And I think it's a good thing for us, obviously, that a lot of our professions are high paid. We live in a good country. But I think to compare that is to compare apples with oranges. And we should probably be looking particularly at Victorian teachers who are among the lowest paid in our country. Yet, arguably, they have the worst working conditions of any state.
I suppose for me the big issue as a parent with a school-aged child is, are we attracting enough good people into teaching? Now, most of the teachers I meet, it's partly the money, it's partly the job security, but there's also, the sense of satisfaction they get from their job that maybe other jobs don't provide. But do you think the wages we pay, are they enough to attract enough decent, intelligent school leavers who will be good teachers?
Well, I guess the proof is in the pudding. The evidence is no, but it is one of the factors. And I think one of the preeminent factors is also conditions at the moment. Student behaviour is out of control. Paperwork is out of control. It's not an enjoyable profession, as enjoyable a profession as it was 10, 15 years ago. So, you could get paid $200,000 and still be miserable. So it's one important part of it, and that's why we, the TPAV, will be advocating for a 43% pay rise for teachers, and that's largely done to no extra expense to the taxpayer, just by structural reform. But that is one of the factors, and the preeminent one is student behaviour. I'll give you a quick example. We've got a member at a Victorian school, a fractured skull, dislocated thumbs, broken nose. The principal let the kid back into the room 20 minutes after he dislocated both of her thumbs. And
how did the student do that? Was he a very large boy or something?
Yeah. 12, 13-year-old boy. You've got young or elderly female teachers. And these people, this is the frustrating part. These kids are flagged as violent, but the teachers so often don't know.
But sorry, just on that, how could any decent principal, put a kid who's just badly assaulted a teacher back into the classroom only minutes later?
Because principals don't have enough autonomy, particularly in public education. The majority of these student behaviour is a problem in public and private. But in public education, principals are beholden to the Department of Education. They're beholden to bureaucrats who are out of touch, out of connection with the local communities, and they don't have any autonomy when it comes to decision-making, particularly around student discipline.
But so I just find this astonishing. So you're saying the Department of Education has a rule that says you can bash up a teacher, and this is what, an older female teacher, was it?
Yes, it was an elderly lady, probably 60 to 65.
So you can bash up a lady aged 60 to 65, and you're a large male student, and there's no punishment, and just go back to class.
Yeah, well, essentially what it is any disciplinary action, suspensions or particularly expulsions, have to be approved by the Department of Education, and principals often have their hands tied, and they're put in a very difficult situation, which is also one of the things. I know it's unbelievable.
But I'm sorry to harp on about this, but surely
right.
surely the safety of the teacher is pretty important, and the other students. If a student has just bashed up an older female teacher, who's to say that he won't bash up a fellow student a moment later?
Yeah, precisely. And it's this unpredictability. It's students who have repeat suspensions, who are deemed a threat, but nothing can really be done about them. And this really comes to the heart of the issue. Principals need to have autonomy. Principals have their hands tied, and the only way for them to have autonomy is to decentralise the education system. At the moment, I'll give you a quick example. There are 5 bureaucrats for every 10 teachers in the Victorian education system. And a functional one is 10 to 1.
So that means that, just assume on average they're all paid the same amount of money. A third of our payroll in public sector teaching, it goes to bureaucrats, not actual teachers.
Correct. And that's why this is not, and I really want to stress this to your listeners, this is not an issue of funding. We've never had education funding this high. There is over $3 billion of waste in the Victorian education system.
What do they all do?
Every single year.
What do all these bureaucrats actually do all day?
We're often creating work for themselves, implementing things like, this political treaty that's going to be put into schools as well, implementing cross-curricular objectives, like all these different things that make teachers' lives harder. That's what the bureaucrats are doing, and they have to do stuff to give themselves a reason for having a job. So we advocate for that to be slashed and brought back to a local level, and that's how you pay teachers more without having to bankrupt the state any further.
Okay, but to go back to something you said before, you said, okay, you're asking for quite a substantial pay rise. Let's say you get that, but nothing is done about the conditions, like, the out-of-control students. It doesn't sound like it'll be a very attractive career. So if principals had more autonomy, what does that mean they could do? To go back to your example of this boy who bashed up a female teacher, does that mean the principal could, I don't know, stick him in a room and lock the door, or just kick him out of the school for 2 weeks, or what?
Yeah, come up with alternative teaching plans, but it ultimately means that the principals are accountable to local communities, not to Department of Education policy. So if you have parents, and this is why the pay rise isn't one thing, the student behaviour isn't one thing. The pay rise is achievable by decentralising our education system. The principal autonomy is achieved by decentralising the education system, and that looks like major restructures in our education system. So we don't have pencil pushers, so we don't have people making teachers' lives living hell. We need to be able to bring it back to a local level. I trust teachers a hell of a lot more than I do with bureaucrats around our children's education. And I think most sensible Victorians are in the same position.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Look, it's been educational, but not in a good way. Edward Schuller there, Teachers Professional Association of Victoria. It's extraordinary. I mean, we talk about crime on our streets and how it's out of control and how magistrates just let kids out on bail over and over and over again. It sounds like they learned this at school.